Yeah, actually.
David, why outside Daily Mail headquarters today?
Well, originally I came down here today to speak. As I talked before, but I'm a comedian and I used to be a journalist. And for climate change, it's something that I care quite a bit about. Actually, I've done some hour shows about lies in the press.
Yes.
And one of the issues that I covered was climate change and global warming. And I used to, when I was a journalist, one of the things I covered was NASA and climate change.
Yep.
So I know the scientific basis is there. And the thing that gets me about so much of what's done in the things like the Daily Mail is they come out with these editorials saying it's cold today or it's raining today, therefore the climate's not changing.
Yeah.
And they made a hell of a lot of hay off of the 98 being really hot.
Yeah.
But you look at NASA data, you look at data that's accepted by scientists, the 15 hottest years in history are in the past 17 years.
Yep.
14 of those 15 are in the past 15 years.
Yeah.
And it's stunningly clear. But I got some things where I had some stories from the Daily Mail and show how they're just ridiculous. I mean, they'll take one bit and go, see, it means the whole world is changing.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like the basic Little John, one of their columnists, is hugely guilty of this. But what he'll do is he'll take like one day, like the Queen's Jubilee, which was raining, and say, if global warming were happening, that day would have been continuous blazing sunshine. It's like meeting that's like meeting the Chinese basketball team and going, do you know the Chinese are enormous?
It's especially one of mine to like fly in the face of science. I mean, 97% of climate scientists say global warming is a fact. Must like a special kind of stubbornness, really, to say those guys are all wrong.
Well, and what's interesting is even the scientists who are unconvinced, overwhelmingly, they say they're not convinced that they don't think the data is all there, but they are really in the minority.
Yep.
The number that are actually saying no, it's not happening, they're wrong, is vanishingly small, and generally in the pay of fossil fuel industry. You know, it's like where did that money for that study come from, and for your nice house? And it's like, oh, Shell, BP.
But I'm still unbiased. Despite that money. So one of the things, like, if you look at global warming and how it could go over the next kind of 10, 15, 20 years, we know that the countries that contribute least to the problem, with the lowest consumption or the lowest emissions, will get hit the hardest. And it's a real thing that in 20 years' time we could see mass migration from around the equator north into Northern Europe and over the UK. So think how outraged and incensed the Daily Mail is today about migration. Imagine how incensed and pissed off they're going to be in 15 years when the whole of North Africa, for example, is on their doorstep. They're going to be really angry, aren't they?
Well, yeah, one of the things that we see, it's one of the, when you've got, 350 million people in Africa, billion in India, all want to come here because it's still habitable. That's going to be difficult. Bangladesh, some ridiculous number of people in Bangladesh live just barely above sea level. And in the river delta in the south of the country, it's like, I forget the numbers, but it's like the population of Britain live like half meter above sea level. Well, all those people will need to move half meter. That's not a lot.
Move where? So I think the Daily Mail, this kind of narrative in a spectrum of its stories, is around unfairness. And I kind of feel that the more you read the Daily Mail as a normal person who's not awake and not receptive to other views, the more inured you are to unfairness. And that unfairness is going to come in very handy when we're closing the door to whole countries who are suffering from civil war or crop failures or famine. No, I think they're kind of like breeding us to have the right attitude to be really selfish and not really care about the problem.
Well, I think that's very much. I mean, I came up with this thing of the 10 Commandments of the Daily Mail.
Okay.
And let me go get it. Because I just wrote it yesterday. So, Commandments. Yeah, the Daily Mail's 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not suffer a beautiful woman to have a blemish or the slightest imperfection without ridicule. Thou shalt hate pedophiles. Thou shalt ogle and lust after 16-year-olds, which is considered a pedophile in much of the world. Do not eat of the carrot, for it causes cancer. Eat of the carrot, for it prevents cancer.
The next one.
A valid point always follows the phrase, I'm not racist, but... Thou shalt be obsessively obsessed with the Kardashians.
Yeah.
Thou shalt hate labor, because they want to sell your kidneys to the French. Thou shalt be outraged over the plight of a blonde child. Thou shalt ignore the plight of millions of brown children. Thou shalt be titillated by a woman scantily clad in public. Thou shalt be scandalized that a woman was very scantily clad in public. And finally, thou shalt be obsessed with footballers' lives. Something heartwarming happening in Britain. Something crazy is happening in the US. Something appalling is happening in the Middle East. Nothing is ever happening anywhere else, ever.
Yeah.
And finally, what about the children?
Would someone please sing this one? So last time we spoke, back in March, with Murdoch, he said about the EU.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels that to really get a grip on global warming, although I'm not a massive fan of authoritarian government, but we need more state intervention, right? Because the free market's not going to sort this problem out for us unless pain becomes difficult. We need more regulation, more regulation of the industry. What was it you told me back in March around bananas and the EU? What are these myths about the EU?
That the EU had banned bananas that weren't, unless they were straight. And it was written about in the tabloids that, crazy EU banning curved bananas.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with them.
No.
It had nothing to do with the EU. It had to do with Tesco's.
Yep, that's it.
Tesco's wanted to have straight bananas.
Yeah, because they stack easier on the shelves. The number of things that are just, I've got loads of examples. There was one thing where, one story I saw, I forget which tabloid it was, but it was about how the EU is banning bagpipes because they break noise at work. Let me see if I can find it. I probably have that here. But the bagpipes thing was they were banning bagpipes, and because bagpipes are loud and they break work regulations for noise. Yeah. And crazy EU bureaucrats, what are they doing? And so I looked into that, and they're not banning bagpipes. It's for work over a full working day. Very few people play bagpipes for a full working day. Although, if you ever go to the Edinburgh Festival, it may seem that way. And this year I had bagpipes and vuvuzelas playing beneath my window in Edinburgh. I was at the festival, and there was this guy playing the vuvuzela for an hour every day beneath my window. And I've got to say, if you really listen to the vuvuzela, you will discover the beauty of the bagpipes.
Yes. Nothing could be worse.
But I looked into that story about the noise regulations, EU noise regulations.
Yep.
And I looked into them. I found that what the EU had done is adopt British work safety regulations for the rest of the EU.
Right.
Because apparently they were quite well thought out.
Yeah.
And the EU went, those are good, let's adopt that across the EU. And they were regulations that started in the Industrial Revolution. So nothing was changing in the UK. What it was Imperial Britain imposing its noise regulations on the rest of the continent.
And the Daily Mail says, Eurocrats invade and...
exactly. Yeah. It's insane.
Right, so I've got a little test for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got an image here.